I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to run the technology that we use, because this is something, Matt, you're correct, is often overlooked or not planned for properly. So a lot of times we look at things top down, right? So I want Matt to talk a little bit about the foundation, the infrastructure. What are some of your thoughts on how we can ensure that our communities are future-proofed for the tech that is going to just come at us? I mean, it's only going to grow.
Yeah, so I'll use a couple year age buildings. So I'll say like a 1999 that we have in Virginia Beach. There's no IDFs, there's no MDFs, there's no data rooms. So we're generating spaces in our existing portfolio, and that's a lot of, I call it wire running throughout the property. And, that's a lot of distress to them. So we're having to put in, a lot of capital to get to that point. Kind of what Garrison was saying, there's challenges with, I'll use Cox going down or Xfinity going down, so we're running multiple lines into structures just to offset that imbalance sometimes. The worst thing I get is, and sometimes it always happens like on a Friday evening or something. Cox is down. We can't chart right now as an example, and I'm like, oh no, here we go. So I just don't want the communities to have that, I'll say, challenge, but also, it gives us more flexibility to move around and work in our spaces. Right now, I'll use another example. We built a property in 2017. Really, that's when smartphones, smart TVs, tablets in the senior space were starting to be utilized. I'll tell you, that building is a lot low voltage wise differently built than our 3-year-old or 2-year-old building now that we have, just based on how much data ports, how many IDFs, MDFs, how many runs we have. But the other piece of the challenge there also is, resident engagement with their devices and stuff like that, especially being away from their families. And we have a great program, a signature program called RUI University. So every month we do classes, engage with them, teach them, ways to use their iPads, stuff like that, smart TVs, etc. So those are kind of two, areas of opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I just want to, does everybody know when he says IDF and MDF, what we're talking about here? Yeah, so, really, when we're talking about foundation, it's so important because you can have the coolest tech in the world, and if you can't run it, you're driving on flat tires, right? So IDF, MDF, these are just little rooms that you can strategically place throughout the building. Ideally, if you don't have them, you want to, and it is a central location for all of your cabling to come in. So when folks like Matt and his team have to come out on a Friday night because things aren't working, everything's accessible. But I do want to ask one, I'm going to go a little bit off script here just because I like this topic, but Garrison, because you were talking about, Cox going down, the internet going down. What do you do to ensure, what do you recommend from a strategic perspective when we're talking about plan and we're talking about budget so that these, communities, residents, staff don't lose their service?
I'd be glad to talk about that. I was actually talking to my team, and this is one of the things that came up, that they were like, please talk about this. And I didn't even tell you that, Jackie, so that's great. And Matt, I think you touched on this a little bit, is in that planning, there's a couple of things that we're gonna sit down and talk about. One is it's very tempting to invest in what I would call subpar technology. And so the upfront cost seems very attractive, but the overall management cost and support cost of that technology is not. And so you need to look at, okay, we're gonna invest in this. It's gonna be in the environment for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that looks like, to make sure that you've got a team of people that can actually properly manage it and do it the cheapest way possible after the investment of the hardware. But then there's a secondary piece, and this is really, I think, what you're touching on, is having really a redundant internet connection so that you've got your data coming in and you've got more than one path for that data to go. And it saves everyone involved, right? Whether it's a charting issue or it's a connectivity issue for the residents. When those situations occur where those systems are down, it's an emergency, and it creates a lot of pain and stress. And this really falls into another component of this, which is, I think it's easy to think about, okay, how can we keep the business up and running? And it's easy to think, how can we make sure the resident actually can operate the way that they want to? But there's an added bonus when it comes to your actual teams and the morale that they have. So when they have to come in and struggle with technology and they're having to call someone for a help desk every single day, or they just give up calling because they're tired of it, it really makes a big difference when it comes to retention. It's kind of like a hidden advantage. We actually have a client that's throughout the Southeast. They've got about 40 communities, and we onboarded them this last year. And after we got everything going, but we were about 3 months in, they called us and they said, we cannot tell you how much a difference this has made for our team members, because now they don't worry about having to come in and use the technology that's in front of them. And so that's all through planning. It's all through putting the right redundancy in place. It's make sure they have the right training, that they have equipment that just works. And that's really, really important when it comes to that planning and budgeting perspective.
All right, so we're talking about how technology is going to change the future of senior living, but that, directly correlates to the problems we're trying to solve, right? So I said earlier that we've been historically underserved. I think that that's starting to change, and now we've got an awful lot of choice in front of us, right? So I want to just start, and I'm going to start with Austin, and everybody can sort of weigh in on this, but what problems, forget technology for a second, but, operationally, from a care perspective and also from an operations or business perspective, what problems do you think still need to be solved that maybe we don't have a fix for, or we don't know of a fix for from a technology perspective?
Oh gosh, there's so many answers for that. The first one that comes to mind, and again, I know the technology's out there, we just have to utilize it and utilize it correctly. But if somebody could solve staffing for us, I think we'd all, have an easier job, wouldn't we? I think there's great technology out there, especially, when I first started, when you used agency, you signed 13-week contracts and that's what you had. And now there's all these platforms where it's basically a scheduling platform, and you choose, I need a caregiver the next day, and they come in. And so, this technology is great. But then on the other side of it, and we spoke with some of our partners that are here this week. Now we have caregivers sitting in the parking lot clocking in on their phone 30 minutes before they come into the building. So, I don't know what the right answer is, but if we could solve, the staffing, and I think it's, like I said, the technology is out there, but if our team could manage their own schedules, if they call off and, everybody gets that text message, there's been a call off, who wants to pick up the shift? If we were just able to communicate that with our teams, think how much time that would, alleviate from our director of nursing, staffing coordinator, whatever you call it in your community.
Well, you took mine, Austin, so.
Because we're all thinking it.
Well, that comes to us, I guess. So let me just step back a second. I think everybody would agree, when you run a hospital, a hotel, and a restaurant all under one building, there's enough complexity in any given day, right? And so anything that eats in to your marginal time is a problem for you and your teams. So I think of technology, and this is a little what Garrison talked about a second ago, no one calls typically and tells you your technology works wonderfully because they just expect it to work, right? If technology is doing its job, it's getting out of the way of someone being able to do their job, right? It shouldn't be even noticeable to them. So the idea of the way we sort of think about this is, if care and comfort of your residents and their families is paramount, anything that eats into the time that's going to be devoted to that is a problem. And if technology in any way, whether it's poor connectivity or not a great distribution of your bandwidth, is a problem. But anything that can help remove the friction and create optimization in your model, in your process, is to me is the best kind of technology. Because the fact is, for any of you, when things work well, you don't notice. When they don't, you notice. And when it comes to care, you can't have that happen. So the idea that you can have a process, and the way we think about technology is basically bringing a best practice in and applying it to all of your people. If it does what it's supposed to do, someone else has solved that problem for you and making it possible for your teams to use it. And especially, it's got to be simple and friction-free. So anything you can think about that provides that I think is a winner. That's what we do, by the way.
I've got a two-part answer, but it can be summed up in one word, which is data. I think as we look into the future and we look at the expansion and the capabilities to automate things and collect data, that there's going to be a significant move that allows us to run more efficiently and allows you to identify problems more quickly. And that can be used in so many ways, right? Whether it be efficiency or even just tracking information in such a way that it can prevent lawsuits, right? Things like that. I think that's one component. I think that's that would be the forward thinking. And some of this technology is here already, and it's really starting to get used in the space. But the other one is, I think, backward looking. And this is it's around protection of your data, whether that's backup and business continuity, which are not the same thing. Backup is I've got a copy of this, but business continuity is I can use that copy even if it's over here, right? And I still talk to so many people that are assuming that they have both those things, and they don't, not necessarily. And the only time that you find out that you don't have it is the time that you need it. So I think that's something that really still needs a lot of time, and it's easy to forget. And you bring somebody in, whether it's your IT person or an MSP, and they're like, you just assume they've got it covered, but they might not. And so there's a business continuity planning component that needs to happen, just to make sure that not only, because you all have plans, right? If a hurricane comes through, you have a plan for what to do with your people, but what are you doing with your data? And how are you going to make sure that you continue to have consistent access to those things, and that you can shift everything and still perform, the day-to-day tasks?
All right, thanks, guys. I'm gonna switch gears. I'm gonna do the opposite here. So we know technology can solve a lot of problems, but I think we all know it can also create new problems. So it's easy to sort of end up with a series of Band-Aids I've seen try to solve sort of one problem at a time, and then you have so much tech it becomes impossible to manage, and you end up with more work, more frustration, and a lot of wasted money. So we'll just go in order here. What are some of the negative impacts you've seen with technology in the communities that you support, and how do you think we avoid sort of creating additional problems with the new technologies that we choose?
You want to go first? I think Matt touched a little bit on, the more devices that we have in our community, the slower, our speeds are. So as we're integrating this technology, it is slowing down our EMR, our EHR, systems as well. So, working to improve that. And then I think, with our current population, and obviously this is going to change over the next couple of years, but we have our caregivers, documenting on iPads and iPhones and iPods and all of that, and sometimes it gives a negative impression to our families and to our residents that we're using technology they're not familiar with it. So it looks like we're on our cell phone sending a text message when ultimately we may be documenting the care that we just provided. So as we roll out new technology to our staff and to our communities, I think it's important to educate our residents on what it is, why it's being rolled out, the benefits of it, so that they understand what they see.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges I see is the training of a lot of the systems, especially onboarding, familiarizing, new team members in the instances or spaces that we work in. It could be a nurse call system, it could be, access control, whatever it may be, but also just in, dedicated instances like your shared drives and whatnot. Where do you house items? What accesses? So there's always, I feel like there's always a training, a nonstop training every, periodically. But one of the other challenges I see is the buy-in as well, especially with the regional teams, the home office teams, and encouraging our communities to utilize these products and our vendors that we spend a lot of money on. At the end of the day, so I feel like if there's a buy-in at the home office level and down, then hopefully our communities will use them a little bit more.
So yes and yes to these guys, and I would say the way that we think about that when we talk about our software being applied is you've got to have a change management plan that identifies kind of the problem you're trying to solve, and it makes it very clear for everybody who's going to now be taking in this new process. Because it, in essence, is a process change that, again, back to my comment previously, it's a best practice you're trying to apply to the team, which may not be the current practice. So having a change management plan, and the really big important part is identify a champion in your organization who can be not only a thought leader, but someone who's educated and perhaps even a super user, or at least understands the problem one click deeper than maybe you do. And so they're not coming to you, they're coming to that champion you've designated who's going to help beat the drum and help make that change management plan come to life for someone, understand the why behind why we're doing it, and especially the whole what's in it for me, that with them is tell them the benefit that comes to them. But you have to report on that, back to the data piece, is report on how they're doing, how adoption's improving, and use the scorecard to make people accountable, because if your champion is good, people are going to fall behind that champion. In essence, if they're communicating well the problem and how to solve it, you're now in a position where that champion can be your go-to, and they become a trusted source for your teams, and not corporates telling us to do this and we just need to comply.
I agree too. The training component and simplification, that's my number one answer. But since y'all took that, I'm going to say one of the other things we see sometimes is technology creep. So you may have someone that has some amount of authority in your organization, and they identify, oh, I can use Dropbox for this. And so some people start using that, and it's great. And then somebody else who doesn't know anything about that says, well, I'm going to use OneDrive. And then somebody else says, I'm going to use this other thing. Now all of a sudden you've got 8 different tools, and everybody's using them. To some degree, there's a tremendous security risk in that. There's a training burden to that. And you can have things very easily slip out of the organization when you have things like that, especially in that example. So really I think to overcome that, though, you have to create a structure inside of the organization that vets technology and then rolls it out and does the training piece. Because otherwise, people are creative, right? You want people to be creative. You want them to go solve these problems. So you got to give them an avenue and a conduit for really identifying great solutions that you then can apply everywhere, and that reduces costs, and it allows you to actually put the right security measures in place.
Yeah, those are all really great answers and everything that I would have talked about. So that was fantastic. So I want to do something fun really quick, and then we'll get back to it. So I want to talk about sort of fan favorites. I'm a big fan of Mindshare, and when you find good vendors and you find good solutions and you find things that really work, I think it's great to sort of evangelize that, right, throughout the community so that other people can benefit. So, and you can have more than one, but just kind of what are some of the favorite, software vendors, solutions that you've worked with, and who you'd recommend?
To name drop. Yeah, no, I think, I mentioned earlier, I think something that I think has been most helpful, most beneficial to my communities, and although we don't like to use agency, as we went through the pandemic and whatnot, having some of these app-based, scheduling platforms where you can quickly, overnight, fill a shift. I know it was super helpful. There was a time where I was filling in as executive director and director of health and wellness in multiple positions at one time, and I would say it was a lifesaver, at that point, to be able to go on an app, say I need a CNA at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and here they are. You have their phone number, their email address. Within a couple minutes, they've signed up for it, and it also gives you the option to kind of click through. It'll show you how many people are requesting it. And I learned yesterday here at the vendor show, some of the platforms even now give you like a rating. So they have a 1 to 5 star rating based off of if they show up on time, if they, how many shifts they pick up and things like that. So it's helping, get a little bit, better outcome of filling that shift versus having somebody that it's their first time ever picking up an agency shift and you don't know what you're going to get.
That's a good question. So I'm going to go on the physical structure side, and I'm going to say access control. There are a ton of companies out there that are access control oriented. They pick a manufacturer, and then they put in their cloud-based system and whatnot. And one of the challenges I see is I don't think a lot of operators realize how many different applications and products that they're housing on their Wi-Fi systems. So I'm more of The other piece of that is having dedicated systems, not SSIDs or networks on your Wi-Fi, but their own system in your buildings. So for me, it would be the Paxton Access Control. They own their own products and they manufacture it themselves, and then they house it on a cloud as well. So.
Yeah, and this is a tough one because for all of you, you probably have to access multiple different apps, I'll call it, or applications, either a mobile app or a web-based app. And the challenge is, how do you keep your data tied together in all those systems? And the challenge in this business is, unfortunately, they have to use a lot of different systems, right? So anything that can be cloud-based, which just is only utilizing the internet as the inbound source for whatever app you're using, makes it a whole lot easier for your teams to get to them any place and any time. And then simplicity. However they access it is, if it can be a single login or single sign-on which stays open to them, and if they were to receive a link that causes them to take action against that, in an email, for example, they're just entering that link, clicking that link, there's no more login. Try to get out of the game of having there be these multiple access logins that people need. Yeah, I know it's easy to say and tough to do, but the SaaS-based or software as a service models that are cloud-based make that a whole lot easier for your teams than specific app downloads, et cetera, which you have to coax them to use or open. I think it creates a lot of complications if you can simplify it to something on the cloud.
All right, well, you took mine. Single sign-on, I think, is a tremendous, tremendous thing. I imagine some of you may have a notebook or a Post-it that have passwords written on it. Please don't do that, but if you only had one password you had to remember, and you could integrate all those other systems into it, it really, really just improves the experience, but it also makes it more secure at the same time, so everybody wins. That being said, there's another thing that I really love that I think sometimes gets overlooked, and that is security training for your teams. And it's not fun. Nobody really loves to do it, but it can make a huge difference and literally save you tens of thousands of dollars, if not your entire business. So it's a worthwhile thing to invest in.
Yeah, I'll go on the operator side too. So everybody has KPIs or reports that need to go up and whatnot. And there's a vendor that actually has a really great product that I've seen. It's PrimeView by ProsperCare. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that or not, but basically they integrate, your CRM, your, back of house, your EHR, everything into one dashboard. So your leaders, your EDs, your home office team members could go into one source and go to their communities and see all those different departments for that community, which I think is a great product.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was a PrimeView user back in the day. Yeah, yep. All right, so I'm going to ask another question here. So there was some interesting stuff that I read just kind of leading up to Argentum. They posted their strategic vision this year, 4 pillars. It's a really great read if you haven't read it. But Ziegler and Leading Age did a survey, it was a couple months ago. It was 150, I want to say, CIOs and CFOs. And what they were asking in the survey was, what are your top 5? What are going to be your next top 5 investments in technology, in the next 12 months? And it was pretty interesting. 37% said infrastructure, 31% said data analytics. We're hearing a lot of this on this panel today, and 31% said EHR, electronic health records, right? Which tells us we still have a little ways to go on that in that direction. So, we'll start with maybe Matt and Austin as operators, right? And then for Garrison and Todd, you guys can answer this as supporting partners. But we want to think kind of like budget aside. Like let's pretend like money didn't matter. If you could have whatever you wanted in the next 12 months, what would it be?
I told Matt I was going to do this, so I have the ideas, and I just want him to build the building. So I don't know if he can get it done in 12 months, but if we could have smart buildings, smart memory cares or assisted livings where, think about it in the future that, 7 o'clock, after dinner, the lights start dimming for you, the music changes, we call it a day pulse. So you're starting off, quiet, slow in the morning, jazz up through midday, you have different types of music playing overhead, your lights are full brightness, and then as the day goes on, they start to dim down, your music changes for dinner. I think it will help our residents wake up in a better mood. If you could put diffusers, that automatically come on, so we're not having to walk around filling up water in diffusers every day. If you could make us like a smart building.
That's good. Yeah, I think one of the big areas of opportunity is obviously the AI piece, tracking. There's a few camera systems out there and whatnot, and e-call systems. But I think the robots are going to come into play. Obviously there's a very pronounced one in a lot of these conferences that I see. I want to see a little bit more in depth or more variations with the robots and how they can be used, and where they could go is really one of the big question marks I have. But probably I would say if I get a bunch of robots, that'd be fantastic.
I'm going to add to that real quick. So has anybody else here at the hotel experienced the robot that's delivering like room service? No? So I'm over in the tower and I'm like coming down trying to get to the lobby, and I get to the lobby and the doors don't open in the elevator. So it shoots back up to the 15th floor and the doors are open and the alarm's like going off. And when the doors open, the robot gets on the elevator with me. And so I can't control, you can't push any buttons. The robot gets on and like the screen lights up and it says going to lobby. So thank goodness that's where I was going. And I rode the elevator down with the robot and the doors open up and then the alarm stops going off and the robot returns to the lobby. So they have one here, and if you get to ride the elevator with it, it's an experience.
So no evil robots, right? That's what you're saying. So I'm going to take the question to a little bit different direction. I would say this to all of you. There are so many companies out there wanting to solve problems for you. And this industry, I think, is at an inflection point, especially with changes in leadership, a lot of new younger leaders that are more technology forward, that kind of thing. I would encourage you, if you're approached by someone who's trying to solve a problem for you and will do it for you for free or close to it, we need use cases in this industry to help solve some of the meatiest, toughest problems to solve. So if someone approaches you and offers to help you solve a problem and they say, we want to do this, just know they're doing it through the lens of the real world, because a lot of what we have to do in design in our business in software is we can't do it and fully execute it in a lab because we don't know how real people react to it. So in fact, there's a use case that's similar to one of these that we're just talking about here, that our product lead is here, and we're trying to find users that are willing to have us put it in and let it start to optimize and learn things, for example, in communities. So, and we've had some great conversations. I'm not saying we haven't, but if anyone ever approaches you and says, we want to help you solve this problem, the cost of technology development has started to come down, where there's a lot of plug-in and a lot of tools that could be combined to make solutions much cheaper and faster for you. So if you're ever offered that opportunity for someone who's trying to solve a problem, take them up on it. There's no nefariousness to it as long as it's secure, et cetera. The things that you need to be able to identify as true is take them up on it, because there are a lot of folks who want to solve problems in this industry.
Todd, I want to bounce off that a little bit, because one of the things that we're seeing, and I think one of the reasons the EHR is on that list probably, is that people realize that they need systems that can talk to each other. And they invested in something 5-10 years ago, and it was fine then, but since then they've layered on 2-3 other products, and they just don't talk, whether that is their revenue piece and their EHR and 2 or 3 other things. So investing in things that do communicate easily with each other, I think that's important. But in the absence of that, like one of the things that we're looking at, because we have a business consultant group, we're looking at interoperability options where we can actually create those mechanisms in the cloud that can make those systems talk to each other. So if I had an unlimited checkbook for you all, that's what I would say. Look at that, because that data and the way you use that data is going to be so important, and is what's going to let you really make some really good decisions in the future, but also increase efficiencies and help overcome some of the other problems that I know you all are experiencing.
And I'll tack on to one thing Garrison said. One thing, if you remember this only, if you're a decision maker about making solution choices, for example, is just ask the question, does the back end have an open API or something like that just means that has an open way to receive data that's transferred in the back end? The front end user never knows that's even happening. But if you're making solution choices, make sure you don't get caught in the situation that Garrison's talking about, whereas now it's outdated later because it doesn't talk to other systems. Does it have an open API? You sound really smart and technical, but if they answer no, then just move on, because in this world, interoperability is a given. It should be able to happen.
I actually want to add a comment to that as well. So because I live in the world of data integration for CareWork, right? And one of the challenges, and that's, you're totally right. We want an open API. We want interoperability. And we see that a lot with many new solutions, or you'll have very specific solutions in which that's sort of inherent. So most CRMs, time and attendance, things like that. But when we get into the clinical records side of the house, it becomes extremely difficult because we've got sort of these staples that we've used for many, many years as an industry, both on the post-acute care side and the senior living side. And because of HIPAA requirements and our regulatory requirements, that they've really got that stuff locked down. So it does become a little bit more difficult to pull that data in. But I think you're right. I think that as new solutions become available, we as the problem solvers, right? We as the software companies really need to think about how we can do what's best for the community. Make sure that all of our data can really come together and that it's very easy for our customers to gain access to it. All right, so I want to just ask everybody here, because what do you think? What do you think technology looks like 5 years, 10 years from now in senior living? What does the future look like to you? Robots.
Robots, yeah. The elevator alarms and robots delivering room service. I mean, that would be nice. I think, especially for new developments, I envision it probably like a lot of the hotel rooms here, where the light switches are these digital light switches, multiple dimmers on each different light source, controlling TVs, with iPhones or iPads in the room, things like that. I really think with the population that's going to be moving into senior living over the next 5 or 10 years, that technology integration will be important.
Yeah, definitely on the physical side. I mean, I think, we're going to have to start looking at putting a lot of dollars into, infrastructure in the existing communities, but also the devices and the usability of a lot of equipment for the residents and our staff. I'm hoping to see a little bit more on the nursing and care side, more equipment on that side. Pieces, there's a lot, you can go to the hospital or, surgical room stuff, and there's a ton of new equipment in there, but there's not that many on our side yet, on the senior living side. So I'd like to see more from that piece.
General statement about 5 years from now. So I have an nearly 88-year-old dad who's in an assisted living community. One of his biggest challenges is his Wi-Fi strong enough for him to use his iPad, okay? That's my dad, who was born in 1935. With the coming boom, or the silver tsunami concept coming in, you're going to have way more sophisticated residents coming technologically than you've had in the past. Their expectations of excellence when it comes to technology is what they've been used to using like this in their hands since they were way, way back in their 70s. Okay? Well, imagine what it's going to be like with someone who's had it since they were 55, right? So having the ability to have the infrastructure that works and so that things work the way they expect them to is probably one of the bigger challenges you'll have, including interactions, whether it's with robots or not. That robot ought to perform with excellence because they're going to have encountered it somewhere else in the world probably before they come to you.
I think one of the biggest changes we're going to see is the incorporation of AI into everything that we're doing. And there are actually some advantages that I think exist in this space, because there are some things that are right now kind of what I would call behind, right? But that means that it's much easier to launch forward. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity to incorporate that to make your lives better, to make the entire team's lives better, but also for the residents' experience is just going to improve, and it's going to be able to allow you to identify things quickly in a way that you can't do today. And I'll hand this back, but real quick, I just want to make sure everybody knows I've got a booth here, but I'd love to talk about technology. We are trying to figure out how we can actually offer more and do more for this space. So please come talk to me, even if it's just to tell me, hey, this is horrible and stupid, and I wish you could help me figure it out. You IT people are driving me crazy. That's fine. So I really appreciate y'all letting us be here today.
I'm going to get Garrison's cell phone number for my dad's IT support for his iPad.
I want to add one thing to that, because absolutely I think that the resident, the typical resident is going to look much different 5-10 years from now. But I want to add too that I think that the expectations of our staff are going to change. A bigger population of our caregivers are, what comes after millennial? I don't even remember. What's the new one? Whatever that is, right? Who've literally never lived without technology, never a day in their lives, right? So that expectation is going to be huge. Like if you have ever had a teenager and the Wi-Fi is not working, oh my God, it's like the world has ended. Imagine trying to do that at work, right? With an entire staff, full of Wi-Fi users. So I just want to say that I really think that as operators, as IT professionals, it is our job to provide what not just our residents need, that's a given, but what our staff needs, right? And that is so important to retention, and staffing is the #1 problem that we're talking about all the time. And you are right, we have to provide a service to our staff the same way that we would provide a service to our residents, just a different way. So I'm off my soapbox there. All right, so I want to really quick, because I think my favorite question was like the magic wand. If budget wasn't an issue, like what would you do in the next 12 months? I want to hear from just a couple people out here. I want to hear what your wish list would be. Who wants to go? 12 months, no budget restrictions, you can have whatever you want. This cannot be true. I bet you all of you are asking people for stuff every day. Here we go.
Progress notes, okay, and I use QuickBooks here. But basically, if you could somehow assign a score in certain words and then generate a text or email to me, because based on the scoring, we can then says, yes, the staff are documenting something here that needs the executive director's immediate attention, not after things have gone downhill, but ahead of heading downhill. So the reality is the quicker I can see it, the faster I can solve it. And of course, my perspective, I think, literally the AI technology is now there. You've got the equipment to do it. You need the algorithm that would essentially assign scores to different words. A different word, you have different activities, meanings, and I can tell you for an informed administrator, they're going to know immediately, yeah, we're going to start doing this step. You need to get on this right now, and in the next 3 hours, I want this, and this. Because heading off the problem is key to, making sure you don't have some sort of catastrophic event or whatever. But the extent to which we're being, advised of these things through our EHR system would be a big deal. We're using AI technology in my building right now, and I can tell you the staff are just absolutely crazy about it because it's making life incredibly more simple and clean for them. But the big thing is the progress notes and the data that we have flowing into our system. We could somehow figure out how to fight that. That'd be a winner.
AI is going to make it predictive too, so before it happens, you're going to know because of trend lines on that algorithm.
Right.
So it'll make you know it's about to happen.
You can create little graphs.
That's right.
Okay. When you tell it to create the graphs, you can see the train wreck.
Yep. That's right.
Literally see it from the amount of data you have. So what would be better is if the AI suddenly, like some of the other AI technology, I get text messages on my phone from AI fall cameras, and toilet seats, and all this other stuff we do. And the reality is, if I can get it sent to me that says, go look at this, as an executive director, that's where I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to focus on where we have emerging issues, rather than having to have facility managers trying to figure it all out and have multiple care coordination meetings. Listen, the quicker I know, the quicker we solve it.
No, I've had a couple of conversations. I'll talk to you after because you're not the first person to talk to me specifically about that. So that was great input. So thank you guys for all of your input, and thanks everybody for participating. Have a great rest of your day.